Vito Bertoldo wasn't meant for war. Army recruiters had told him so 7 times. He was half blind, unfit for combat. When a recruiter finally stamped his papers out of pity, it was only as kitchen staff. Bertoldo didn't care what patch was on his uniform. He was in, and he would find a way into the fight. In January 1945, in the French village of Hatten, he got his chance. The command post where he was peeling potatoes received alarming news. German armor was closing in, and the situation outside the village was collapsing. The officers ordered a hasty retreat. Bertoldo begged to stay behind, alone, to cover their escape. Better to return home in a box than return having never fought. He dragged a .30 caliber machine gun and placed it at the entrance of the building. Moments later, 2 German armored battalions rolled into the village. They expected a handful of fleeing Americans. Instead, they found a half-blind cook who waited the whole war for this moment. Pearl Harbor was still burning when Vito Bertoldo marched into the Decatur, Illinois recruiting station, December 8, 1941. America was at war, and every able-bodied man in town was lining up to fight. The coal dust was still embedded under his fingernails from the morning shift when the army doctor held up the eye chart. Bertoldo squinted through his thick glasses, leaning forward, straining to make out even the largest letters. The doctor didn't need to see more, saying, quote, "Son, I'm sorry. You're 4F, unfit for military service." The words hit harder than any punch Bertoldo had taken in the mines. Around him, his friends and neighbors were getting approved, shaking hands, ready to ship out. The son of Italian immigrants, born December 1st, 1916, Bertoldo had grown up believing in the American dream. Now, when America needed him most, he was being told he wasn't good enough to fight for it. Bertoldo told the recruiter there had to be a mistake. His accent carrying traces of his parents' Calabrian dialect. Quote, "I can work. I've been hauling coal since I was 16. I drive trucks. Test my strength. Test anything else." But the answer was final. Quote, "It's your eyes, son. You'd be a liability in combat." Next. Liability. The word burned as Bertoldo walked past the line of accepted recruits. Outside, Decatur streets bustled with 1940s wartime energy. Factory whistles announced extra shifts for military production. Women headed to work jobs that yesterday had belonged to men, now bound for boot camp. Everyone was doing their part. Everyone except him. For weeks, Bertoldo haunted that recruiting office. He tried the Navy, rejected. The Marines, rejected. Even the Coast Guard turned him away. Each time, the same verdict: 4F. The bulky lenses that helped him navigate the dark mine shafts were now a prison, keeping him from the fight. His fellow miners started calling him Lucky Rocky, lucky to have a free pass while they shipped overseas. They didn't get it. Bertoldo didn't want safety. He craved purpose. His parents had fled poverty in Italy for opportunity in America. This was his chance to repay that debt, and his own body was betraying him. By spring 1942, Bertoldo had memorized the eye chart. Not well enough to pass legitimately, but well enough to get creative. When the Decatur recruiting station started recognizing him, he took a bus to Springfield, then to Champaign, then to Chicago. Each time, he got a little further in the process before the eye tests exposed him. But Army quotas were rising. Casualties from the Pacific were mounting. On his 8th attempt, Bertoldo found a recruiting sergeant who was behind on his monthly numbers. Reviewing Bertoldo's file, the man finally said, quote, "I can get you in, but only for limited service. Stateside only. Military police or kitchen duty. That's the best I can do." Bertoldo didn't hesitate to sign up. He'd spent 6 months fighting for the privilege of peeling potatoes for soldiers who could actually fight. It wasn't heroic or glamorous, but Vito Bertoldo was finally in uniform. The man who'd been rejected 7 times was now Private Bertoldo, serial number 36793293, cook and military policeman. At Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, they put him through basic training, alongside men who'd be storming beaches and jumping from planes. Bertoldo struggled with marksmanship. His thick glasses fogged in the humidity and shifted when he ran, but he refused to quit. When others complained about kitchen duty, Bertoldo volunteered for extra shifts. When they needed someone to stand guard in the freezing rain, Bertoldo took double watches. He would later admit, quote, "I wanted to do more than just stand guard or do the cooking." But for now, this was his war, chopping onions until his eyes streamed tears and standing gate duty. All Vito Bertoldo knew, as 1942 turned into 43, was that he'd rather perish trying to serve than live knowing he hadn't. By late 1943, the war had become a numbers game, and America was losing. Fatality rates in Italy were exceeding replacement rates. The impending invasion of France would require every available trooper. Standards that seemed ironclad in 1942 were bending under necessity. The army granted Bertoldo a special permission to retrain as an infantryman and deploy to Europe, not as a combat soldier exactly, but as something in between. He was assigned to Company A, 1st Battalion, 242nd Regiment, 42nd Infantry Division, the famous Rainbow Division from World War I, now reconstituted with fresh recruits. Officially, he was still on kitchen duty, but with a critical addition, he could, quote, fight as needed. The 42nd Infantry Division was in an odd position in late 1944. Once a legendary force, it had been deactivated after World War I, then hastily reassembled with whoever was available. It had green troops who'd never seen combat, support personnel trained as emergency infantry, and recently appointed officers trying to make a fighting unit from scattered parts. Captain William Corson commanded Company A, and amid all the problems he had with his green improvised squads, one frustrated him the most: the mess man, Vito Bertoldo. Bertoldo wasn't drinking, fighting, or going AWOL. It was an ironic position for someone who'd fought so hard just to wear the uniform. After 2 years of rejections and appeals, after finally making it into an infantry division headed for combat, Bertoldo was making trouble in the one place he was supposed to belong: the kitchen. He was constantly at odds with the company's mess sergeant, and he was known as a loudmouth. This soon made him a pain in the neck to his superiors. By late 1944, Private First Class Bertoldo arrived in France with the 42nd Division. The timing couldn't have been worse, or, from Bertoldo's perspective, better. In December 1944, soon after the division landed, the Germans launched Operation Nordwind, also called the Other Battle of the Bulge. Hitler's goal was to punch through the thinly stretched American lines in Alsace, destroy the U.S. 7th Army, and perhaps capture Strasbourg. The unprepared 42nd Infantry Division was rushed to the front to help stop this last-ditch German attack. Bertoldo's regiment, the 242nd Troops, went into action around the villages of Hatten and Rittershofen in early January 1945. These villages sat directly in the path of the German advance. On January 5, 1945, powerful German forces struck. The 25th Panzer Grenadier Division and 21st Panzer Division, veterans of the Eastern Front, were equipped with Tiger tanks and 88mm guns. The American defenders, many fighting for the first time, were immediately pushed to their limits. The 42nd Division soldiers, lacking armor or heavy artillery support, had to improvise. During one chaotic week, companions and battalions were shifting around. Corson commented that it was, quote, like firefighters plugging gaps. By January 8, 1945, elements of Bertoldo's battalion were defending Hatten under severe pressure. Company A had taken up positions in concrete pillboxes outside the town. The German forces were infiltrating the perimeter, preparing for a full-fledged assault that would turn Hatten into a slaughterhouse. The German offensive was 3 days old, and Hatten was becoming a nightmare. Shell-shocked soldiers stumbled back from the line with stories of Tiger tanks crushing foxholes, of entire squads vanishing in artillery barrages. Company A held positions in concrete pillboxes outside the town, waiting for the storm to hit them. Then orders came down from the battalion headquarters. They needed 3 soldiers from each company to guard the battalion command post in Hatten itself. Not a punishment exactly, but not a reward either. Corson saw this as an opportunity to stop his kitchen troubles. He would later recall, quote, "I told the first sergeant that the cook, Vito Bertoldo, was number 1 on that detail. Good riddance, I thought." Standing guard duty, while your unit prepared for combat, was nobody's idea of glory. But Bertoldo had been the, quote, only real discipline issue in the unit. Corson believed a night guard in the commando post would scare Bertoldo into behaving. Company A had taken up defensive positions in the old Maginot Line fortifications, concrete pillboxes that had failed to stop the Germans in 1940 and probably wouldn't stop them now. The men huddled in the ruins of France's failed defense, watching the horizon for the first signs of German armor. Bertoldo gathered his gear without complaint. After fighting 2 years for the chance to see combat, he was being sent away from his unit right before the battle. Voluntold, in army parlance, volunteered by someone else. The other cooks probably smirked. The troublemaker was now somebody else's problem. The walk from Company A's positions to the battalion CP in Hatten took less than an hour, but it was like crossing into another world. Outside the town, foxholes and pillboxes dotted the frozen ground. Inside Hatten, narrow streets wound between ancient stone buildings that had survived one world war and were about to be tested by another. The 1st Battalion Instruct Post was set up in a sturdy building near the center of town. Maps covered tables. Radio operators hunched over their sets. Officers clustered around acetate-covered situation boards, marking German positions in grease pencil. This was the nerve center of the battalion's defense, and it needed protection. 9 men total to secure the building. Bertoldo took his position at the CP entrance as darkness fell on January 8th. Through his specs, he could see muzzle flashes far in the distance. The temperature dropped below freezing. He took a deep breath. This was the night. By 11 p.m., the sound of running engines had spread across the village's ancient stone roads. Not American engines, no. It was the deeper, potent sound of German armor. Panzers, their shadows moving through Hatten's outskirts, their commanders confident in their night vision equipment and veteran crews. At Company A's pillboxes, all hell was breaking loose. German infantry had infiltrated the positions. Captain Corson later described the chaos. Men firing at shadows, grenades exploding within the narrow tunnels connecting pillboxes, the screams of wounded soldiers echoing off concrete walls. Company A was being stormed. Corson himself was wounded and captured along with dozens of his men. Those concrete pillboxes became traps, surrounded and systematically reduced by German assault teams. But Bertoldo had no idea his unit had been decimated. He stood at his post, watching German vehicles probe Hatten's defenses. The early hours of January 9th brought artillery, massive earth-shaking bombardments that turned buildings into rubble. German attackers had broken through the main line of resistance. Inside the CP, the battalion staff faced an impossible decision: stay and risk capture, or evacuate while they still could. Maps were burned, radios prepared for destruction. The brain of the defensive efforts was about to make a run for it. Bertoldo could have simply followed orders, evacuated with the staff, fallen back to a safe position, and lived to fight another day. He was just staff after all. But he saw this crisis as something else. The opportunity he'd so desperately been waiting for. A chance to actually fight. He volunteered to stay behind and cover the retreat. One man with a machine gun against an entire German assault force. The staff officers must have thought he was insane. Or maybe they were just desperate enough to accept any delay, any confusion that might help them escape. They had no idea that Bertoldo's offer wasn't bravado. It was the culmination of 2 years of rejection, frustration, and determination. As the battalion staff slipped away into the darkness, Bertoldo hauled a .30 caliber machine gun to the CP entrance. German tanks were already entering Hatten, their commanders scanning for targets. Behind them came the infantry, hundreds of veteran soldiers who'd fought from Russia to France. The 25th Tank Grenadier Division and 21st Panzer Division were elite units. They'd faced the Red Army at Kursk, the British at Caen, the Americans at Metz. They didn't expect serious resistance from a battalion CP that was obviously evacuating. They certainly didn't expect Vito Bertoldo. At 4:30 a.m. on January 9th, the last American footsteps faded into darkness, leaving Vito Bertoldo alone with a machine gun and the approaching thunder of German armor. Through the doorway came the sounds of tank engines growling, commanders shouting in German, the metallic rattle of ammunition being loaded. Bertoldo positioned the gun to cover the main street and waited for dawn. The first Tiger tank rumbled past at 5 a.m., its 88mm gun sweeping for targets. Bertoldo held his breath, invisible in the shadows. Let it pass. Behind the armor came the Panzer Grenadiers, 40-plus veterans of the Eastern Front, moving in tactical formation. At 5:15 a.m., Bertoldo made a decision that defied every principle of military survival. He stepped outside, into the middle of the street, fully exposed, and opened fire at the group of German men who were certain they were walking into an abandoned village. The .30 caliber erupted at 600 rounds a minute. The first burst caught a squad in the open, dropping them before they could scream. He swept left, taking down another group. Then right, soldiers dove behind rubble. In 10 seconds, a dozen Germans were gone, and every enemy soldier in Hatten knew precisely where he was. Return fire exploded from 3 directions. Rifle rounds cracked past his head. An MG-42 opened up, its distinctive ripping sound filling the air. The Panzer IV's turret was already rotating toward him. Bertoldo had perhaps 3 seconds before its 75mm gun turned him into mist. He dove through the CP doorway as the tank fired. The shell detonated where he'd been standing, blowing chunks of masonry through the entrance. Inside, Bertoldo didn't pause. He hauled the gun to a window and resumed firing at the now alert German infantry. 2 half-tracks rounded the corner at 5:30 a.m., rear door swinging open. 20 Panzer Grenadiers began dismounting, bunched together, assuming the tank had suppressed the American position. Bertoldo leaned out the window, again completely exposed, and held down the trigger. The entire group went down in a hurricane of bullets. The Germans pulled back, radioing for artillery support. They assumed they faced a reinforced squad at a minimum. Bertoldo encouraged this fiction, dragging his gun between windows, varying his rate of fire, making one weapon sound like 3. At 11 a.m., an 88mm round finally found him. The shell punched through the window and detonated inside. The explosion lifted Bertoldo off his feet and hurled him across the room into the far wall. His ears rang. Plaster dust filled his lungs. The machine gun was blown off its mount. Bertoldo strapped it to a table using his belt, aimed through the ruined window, and kept firing. For 12 hours, he held that position. When the gun overheated, he urinated on the barrel. His canteen water was too precious. When Germans tried flanking, he shifted positions. When ammunition ran low, he switched to single shots, making each round count. As darkness fell, the field telephone crackled. Evacuate to the alternate CP down the street. Bertoldo volunteered to stay behind and cover the movement, alone, all night. One man on his own, keeping the illusion of a defended position. In the pre-dawn hours of January 10th, Bertoldo finally moved to the alternate command post. When he arrived, officers asked who else was with him. He sighed and answered, quote, "No one, just me." The room fell silent. They assumed at least a squad had held the original position through the night. At 6 a.m., the Germans launched their heaviest assault yet at the new CP location. A Panzer IV led the attack, supported by a self-propelled 88mm gun and about 15 Panzer Grenadiers. Bertoldo decided the best approach was to cover the new CP from the overlooking building next to it. A few other defenders joined him, but there was little organization. Everyone was fighting their own war. Bertoldo began shooting at the enemy infantry from the building's windows just as he had done before. The Panzer Grenadiers scattered in a panic. The Germans, infuriated at the antics of this one man, sent the 88 closer to the building, so much so that its muzzle nearly poked through one of the windows. The first time it fired into the room, the shockwave was so strong it knocked Bertoldo down and wounded some of the other defenders. Blood poured from his nose and ears. His glasses were shattered. Through the ringing in his head, he heard German voices. The squad was preparing to storm the building. Fighting through double vision, Bertoldo made his way back to his machine gun. When the first German appeared, he fired a burst that sent the entire squad retreating. By noon, German commanders had committed an entire company to eliminating the strong point, still unaware it was little more than one man. Each time the Germans thought they'd silenced the position, machine gun fire would resume from a different window. When ammunition ran low, he again switched to single shots, making each round count. At 4:30 p.m. on January 10th, American reinforcements finally counterattacked. A relief force from the 79th Ground Forces Division broke through to Hatten's outskirts. Hearing American weapons joining the fight, Bertoldo fired his last belt of ammunition in one continuous burst, the barrel glowing red, providing cover for the advancing infantry. When soldiers reached his position at sunset, they found Bertoldo barely conscious, still gripping the machine gun, surrounded by thousands of spent casings. The investigation started immediately. Battalion intelligence officers walked through Hatten's ruins, counting shell holes, measuring distances, and collecting spent casings by the thousand. The numbers didn't add up. One man couldn't have done this. But witness after witness confirmed the impossible. Staff officers who'd evacuated the original CP on January 9th swore Bertoldo stayed behind alone. Soldiers from the alternate position described seeing him blown across rooms multiple times, only to crawl back to his gun. German prisoners, when questioned, spoke of a strong point that had devastated their assault waves with coordinated fire from multiple positions. When told it was primarily one man, they refused to believe it. The 1st Battalion, 242nd Infantry, had entered Hatten with 781 men, 33 officers, and 748 enlisted. 3 days later, only 264 remained effective. Company A, Bertoldo's unit, had virtually ceased to exist. German losses were even more revealing. 2 elite divisions, the 25th Panzer Grenadier and 21st Panzer, had been rendered combat ineffective. The official count credited Bertoldo with eliminating at least 40 enemy soldiers, but everyone knew the number was higher. The Germans couldn't evacuate all their fallen from those 2 streets. Colonel Hans von Luck of the 21st Panzer Division would later write that Hatten-Ritterschaffen was, quote, one of the hardest and most costly battles that had ever raged on the Western Front. His division's offensive capability was broken, not by American armor or artillery, but by the delay and confusion inflicted by a single determined defender. Bertoldo's 48-hour stand had given American forces crucial time to establish new defensive lines. Other units rushed in to continue the breakthrough. By late January, Operation Nordwind, Hitler's last offensive in the West, had failed. The German army would never mount another major attack. Word spread through military channels like wildfire. A man classified 4F had held off an armored division. The kitchen discipline problem had saved an entire battalion command structure. In Washington, the Army's personnel branch quietly began reviewing policies. If a half-blind cook could do this, what did that say about their classification system? How many other Bertoldos had they rejected? The recommendation for the Medal of Honor moved up the chain of command with unprecedented speed. Witnesses provided sworn statements. Officers who'd never agreed on anything agreed to this. Vito Bertoldo had performed one of the most extraordinary acts of individual courage in American history. By November 1945, the paperwork reached President Truman's desk. The former artillery captain from World War I read it twice. Truman told his aide, quote, clear my schedule for December 18th, and get me Eisenhower. He needs to see this. On December 18th, 1945, the White House Blue Room was packed with reporters and military brass. Photographers competed for the best shot. At the center of it all stood Master Sergeant Vito Bertoldo, looking uncomfortable in his dress uniform, thick glasses reflecting the camera flashes. President Harry Truman held the Medal of Honor citation, reading aloud, quote, Master Sergeant Vito R. Bertoldo fought with extreme gallantry while guarding 2 command posts against the assault of powerful infantry and armored forces. With inspiring bravery and intrepidity, Major Sergeant Bertoldo withstood the attack of vastly superior forces for more than 48 hours without rest or relief, time after time escaping death only by the slightest margin, killing at least 40 hostile soldiers. Truman paused, studying the short, stocky man before him. He'd not just gone on a violent frenzy, he'd performed a carefully calculated, sustained operation that took more than guts. The press clamored for a statement. Bertoldo, ever modest, delivered words that would define him, quote, "All I did was try to protect some other American soldiers. At no time did I have in mind that I was trying to win something." Captain William Corson recovered from his wounds and German captivity. One day, he opened the newspaper to find the president decorating his former kitchen problem child. He would later comment, quote, "Imagine my surprise." The man he had tried to get rid of had become one of America's most decorated heroes. Bertoldo received additional decorations: the Bronze Star with Oak Leaf Cluster, the Purple Heart, and the French Croix de Guerre with Silver Star. His entire battalion received the Distinguished Unit Citation for the defense of Hatten, though everyone knew one man had made the crucial difference. Eisenhower, who had commanded millions in Europe, sought a private word with Bertoldo after the ceremony. What they discussed went unrecorded, but witnesses said the Supreme Commander seemed genuinely awed by Bertoldo. As Bertoldo left the White House, a reporter asked one final question. What would he do now? He revealed he wanted to help veterans like him. He said, quote, "The best way to honor the dead is to try to make it up to the living who've given the best years of their lives in the interest of peace."